Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Shapiro. I'm the Director of Programming and Engagement at the Anderson Collection. And first off, thank you for coming. I want to recognize that Stanford sits on the ancestral land of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. Consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. I also apologize that I'm reading from my phone. This is my first time, so it'll be nice. So what does it mean to make work about a place you are no longer in, even if that move is temporary? We are here with MFA students from Stanford University and New Mexico State University for a virtual studio visit with artist Krystal Ramirez in Stanford, California, and Justin Favela in Springdale, Arkansas. Ramirez and Favela both have work in the exhibition Contemporary Ex-Votos, Devotion Beyond Medium, currently on view at the New Mexico State University Art Museum in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Both artists also hail from Las Vegas, Nevada, creating work that addresses where they come from while living elsewhere. I will now introduce Krystal, who will then introduce Justin. I will also say there'll be a Q&A at the end of the conversation, and we'll have the students in dialogue with each other, and then we will have the chat open as well. So Krystal Ramirez's work is interdisciplinary and centered around the discernment of class, labor, and consumption of the brown body. Krystal is a second-generation immigrant from the working class landscape of Las Vegas, Nevada. Her work's visual language and written text reflect the weightless and hallucinatory existence of immigrants with no history. Employing materials such as plastics, drywall, and paper, Ramirez highlights erased labor in their narratives within the materials. She also uses bright fluorescent colors to create a spiritual and emotional experience, referencing her first sensory experience of the Catholic Church and the neon-clad landscape of her home in Las Vegas, Nevada. Krystal received a BFA in photography from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2009, and is currently an MFA candidate in art practice here at Stanford University. We are so glad to be in your studio today, Krystal.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm supposed to introduce Justin. Excuse me while I pull this up. I thank you so much for having us. And I didn't realize, sorry, I thought, I don't know why I didn't have this pulled up. I apologize. Okay. Justin Favela is the mixed media artist who is known for making large scale sculpture, installations, and in piñata style or medium. His work references pop culture, art history, society, cultural commentary, and his own Guatemala Mexican American heritage that is rooted and growing up in Las Vegas, Nevada. His work often celebrates his identity as a queer person of color raised in the Southwest United States while challenging the ideas of Latinidad and cultural appropriation.
Thank you. Thank you, Krystal.
So nice to have you, Justin.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here tonight. And, you know, we're here to talk about making art about where we're from, even though we're not there. And I'm in Springdale, Arkansas right now, hosting an artist dinner. I have officially double booked myself for the first time. It feels great, unprofessional, but I'm still here, damn it. I made it. But I think Krystal and we're gonna start with a slideshow presentation to give you a little bit of a background on the Ex-Voto show that we're in at NMSU. And then we'll get into our individual practices and kind of interview each other as we go along. And then we want to leave it open at the end of the hour, most of it, I think, to really talk to you and do and really get into the studio visit. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce the beautiful, the wonderful, the very talented curator and director of the New Mexico State University Art Museum, Marissa Sage, who's gonna intro the show for us.
Thank you, Justin. Justin, I miss seeing your face.
Me too. I miss you. Oh my God.
Donors are not eating with you right now with this beautiful. We'll talk quick. Maybe you can turn your video off from back and forth.
Like a damn sitcom.
So yes, as Justin said, I'm Marissa Sage. I'm director of the University Art Museum here at NMSU. And I'm so excited to be doing this. And a big part of what we're doing is we are Zooming in all of our grads from our different departments of art here at Stanford and here at NMSU. Which I'm really excited about because Justin came here in 2020, seconds before the COVID began. And Justin got to come and speak to our grads and do studio visits. And I'm really excited for them to kind of hear more about his practice and to be in his studio, and now for Stanford grads to do so as part of the exhibition that we have here. So Contemporary Ex-Voto, Devotion Beyond Medium was curated by Dr. Emmanuel Ortega. I know, Justin, that you'll speak a lot about Emmanuel and a little bit more about his process in relationship to this exhibition. If we could just go forward one slide so people can see the beautiful installation of this exhibition. Contemporary Ex-Voto, Devotion Beyond Medium features 15 contemporary Latin artists responding to NMSU's collection of ex-votos, a type of retablo, a small devotional painting depicting miracles painted on tin and found materials. Traditionally, ex-votos have been studied through an ethnographic and art historic lenses, extracting them from their original devotional contexts, which were generally done when a person, a supplicant, a devotee, would ask an artist, an anonymous artist most oftenly, to paint a painting on tin. If you guys can go to the next slide, just so everyone can see what I'm speaking about. There we go. On tin, this devotional painting to a saint for the miracle or the vow that was bestowed upon them from this saint when they were wishing for help from diseases such as cancer, tuberculosis, post the Mexican Revolution. So most of our collection, and we have the largest Mexican retablo collection in the United States, are between around 1858 and 1958, 1960. And these retablos tell these beautiful, miraculous stories of when a saint has granted this wish, this prayer of devotion. And Dr. Ortega really went in and looked at the themes that existed within these retablos: cultural, socio-political issues of labor, healing, devotion, resilience, and place. And he found, or has worked with, 15 contemporary artists who he sent over 250 of these retablos to, and asked them to create works in their research-based practices, such as Justin and Krystal, who we'll hear about just in a little while, in their views of devotion, of new practices, of their practices in various mediums that speak to their views upon these current themes. And really, it ended up challenging these 200 years of flawed artistic hierarchies that we see very often, retablos or objects such as retablos placed in different collections. And we really got to see how artists, contemporary artists, are working in these very same themes that we saw in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, that these themes are just as present and conscious in our current day society and are being taken up by contemporary artists. And really, what are these different artistic hierarchies? Why are these folk or popular objects? Why aren't they just as contemporary as what Justin and Krystal are? And I think Dr. Ortega made a pretty good argument that they are. So that's how we got to start working with Krystal and Justin. And then Amy and I began the conversation of how important these conversations of place, which are talked about all throughout this exhibition, are in relationship to the many grad students we have in our different departments that are coming from different places. And then of course, Krystal and Justin, who are two Vegas-based artists making work in Stanford and in Arkansas. And I'm so excited to hear more about your practice and also to hear more about your views in relationship to some of these concepts that we explored in this exhibition. And if you can go to the next slide, as seen through your installations, right? Because your installations turned out to be right next to each other and have this absolutely stunning conversation with one another. So thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear more from you two and also from all of our grads. Krystal, take it away.
Well, I think Justin's going first.
Justin starts. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I always like to thank people for letting me talk about myself. It's my favorite thing to do. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm just going to show you a little bit of an overview of my work, just so you can see what I have been doing for the last maybe 10 years. So at the moment, as Marissa mentioned, I am in Arkansas. I am the director of the Live in America residency here. Live in America was a festival that I helped work on for about 3 or 4 years, and we just did it this last summer. I mean, they don't call it performance art, but it's a festival celebrating the liveness, whatever that means. So basically, it's like a new genre as performance art festival. But here in Arkansas, celebrating parts of the world that maybe aren't really known for being places where performance art or maybe alternative art is taken seriously. And being a person from Las Vegas, I can relate to that a lot. Las Vegas has had an emerging art scene for the last maybe 100 years. So and people still keep talking about it as this brand new thing, but it's just not a place that sustains art in the way that we know it. Within this like greater academic and like museum art world, which is what I'm part of. So what I think I'm trying to do here in Arkansas with this residency is make art a little bit more accessible for the people that actually live in my town, in this neighborhood. And that's that pitch is what got me the funding to start it here. So we have funding from the Tyson family, which is also an interesting situation based on the history of how they treat Latinos and their own workers, which is something that I'm investigating in my work now, that I have a little bit more access. So anyway, I'm trying to do good with that money as best as I can. So let me just take you through a little bit. This is a photograph from an exhibition I had at the Denver Art Museum called Fridalandia that was very highly influenced by Dr. Emanuel Ortega. At the time, I was researching 16th century Mexican paintings. So you can see that landscape in the back is a painting by the artist Jose Maria Velasco. And at the time, I was also really interested in how popular media also depicted Mexico, much like these old romantic paintings of the 16th century that were an extension of colonialism. They were like postcards to the rest of the world to show the world how beautiful Mexico was at the time, so that the Spanish and other Europeans would keep colonizing Mexico. This still continues today in the movies and the films and television shows and the art that we see today. So all the sculpture that you see in this installation is from this is a replica, piñata replicas from the set of the movie Frida that came out in 2001. So I made this full Frida fantasy installation. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And so I use piñata in a lot of my work. When I first started making sculpture back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I made a piñata as a joke because all my professors were pushing me to make art about my identity. And I thought, what is the corniest, cheesiest symbol to exemplify Latinidad? The piñata, right? So it was something that I thought I could take back, and I could, I could put the meaning back into it or change the meaning of the symbol through the work. So I started to look at things that maybe aren't taken seriously within this greater art world in academic culture, and really shining a light by softening it and making it this kind of celebratory object that also is connected to religion. The piñata, a lot of people say, there's some accounts that the piñata originated with Catholic rituals around Lent. So you would break the piñata after Lent as your reward, right? The spikes represented the 7 deadly sins. And so here you see a lowrider that is a replica of the Gypsy Rose that I got to display at the Peterson Automotive Museum. It was a show all about lowrider culture. And then on your right is a giant pile of nachos that I did for the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. And that show is an investigation of Tex-Mex food and notions about authenticity when it comes to, what is Mexican food and what is not, which a lot of the time I relate to my identity, Pocho, first generation Latinx queer person in the Southwest, how a lot of times I'm challenged by different Latinos letting me know that I'm not Mexican enough or Guatemalan enough because I, eat nachos or say piñata sometimes. So now let's go on to the next slide. And so I was making sculpture, and then I knew I had something special with this piñata, with these piñata elements. So I started to think of the piñata less as an object and more as a medium. So then I started to take these and make paintings and eventually murals, and then full-on installations like you saw at the beginning. So on the left, you see a piece that is a replica called Plátanos Amarillos by the artist Francisco Yer, a Puerto Rican artist. I made this piece, it was a commissioned work from Museo del Barrio in New York as part of their big triennial called Estamos Bien last year. And I did a lot of research on bananas and the effects that the United States had in the Caribbean and Central American countries, just to have bananas every day. Anyway, that's a piece about that. And then on the right, you see this abstract kind of jungle scene, a mural where I covered a whole museum in New York, the Sugar Hill Children's Museum, in these kind of fantasy lands, which are actually the backdrops of different Disney movies that depict Latin America. This scene here is from the Brazil scenes from the Three Caballeros movie that came out in the 1940s. All right, and now let's go on to the next slide, and I'm gonna just show you another quick of the most recent projects I did. This was at the Des Moines Art Center, where I wanted to highlight the agricultural history there and the immigrant culture there. There's a lot of Latinos, a lot of Central Americans that live there that are never really talked about. So the show is called Central American. And I ate taco pizza there for the first time, which I thought was one of the best foods ever invented in the Midwest. So I thought it was a perfect symbol to represent kind of the mashing of like Latino and Italian immigrant day back in the 60s and 70s, where this food was invented. So before I did a lot of, you can go to the next slide. Before I did a lot of this piñata work, I used to work at the Neon Museum. So here's me giving a tour at the Neon Museum with Dr. Ortega many years ago. You can go on to the next slide. And so when I was asked by Dr. Ortega to do a piece about, inspired by Ex-Votos, I kept thinking about the Neon Museum and all those metal sheets that I would work around. And some of my early work, like this piece here, Estardas, is a direct reference to all those neon signs I used to work around. I just would make them out of cardboard. And Estardas is how my grandma says stardust. So it was, in the very beginning, it was a way for me to take these Vegas symbols and reinterpret them and make them my own. And so with this work here, I was thinking about, this shows about devotion. It's tied to the Catholic Church, but I was raised evangelical Christian, and I've never really directly referenced that and talked about that in my work. So these sculptures for NMSU are my first kind of dipping my toes into that. And I'm actually really going to expand on that, I think, these upcoming couple of years. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the works that are featured. There's basically 4 sculptures, Alleluia, Amen, and then this little green one in the center, the Chinese restaurant sign, and then this kind of new sign that I made. And I'm going to show you exactly where I got these from. So next slide. So right here, this is actually, my grandfather started the first Friends Church, La Iglesia Evangélica Amigos, in Las Vegas back in the 1990s in this Knights of Columbus building that is on 9th and Ogden in downtown Las Vegas. And so you see that blue sign right in the middle where the arrow is, that is the sign that I'm referencing. So if you go to the next slide, right in the center, I'm installing it in this piece, is what the sign looks like today. The building has been painted over, and then I think Latinos own it now. And so they put a little Se Renta sign on the side of it. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this sign here, I was at my grandmother's house while I was building the show, and she has still the original hymnal, the himnario, from when I went to church there. And so I made this into a neon sign to kind of represent the present day church that is still in Las Vegas. Okay, then you can go to the next one. This is where so after it was on Ogden, the church actually moved to this shopping center where the quinceañera shop is now. And so that was what really inspired this, this kind of like regular shopping center signage. And you can go on to the next slide. And then this signage here from next to my uncle's mini market in North Las Vegas inspired the Alleluia Amen piece. And so Pavelito, or Dr. Emmanuel Ortega, and I used to have a podcast together, and we did this shoot right in front of it one time. And so that's the direct reference to the Alleluia Amen in the show that are just kind of these big, 1960s style plastic cabinet signs. All right, and then on to the last sign, which is an iconic Las Vegas neon sign, Fong's Garden, which has now been taken over by a bunch of Latino and Latinx businesses. It's a Marisco spot now, and then all those other businesses that you see now. So originally, the third spot my church moved into was actually into a Chinese restaurant. Not this one specifically, it didn't have a cool sign, so I took some artistic liberties and used a different sign. And you can see here the banner just kind of hanging off of it to show that, a church actually does use the space, and I kind of edited it down a little bit. But the idea behind this whole series of work, you can go on to the next one, is I was really thinking about just the gentrification that I've witnessed, and how I'm kind of part of that now that I'm living in Arkansas. You know, the first sign of gentrification is when the artists start moving in and doing projects and taking over buildings. I'm here in Springdale, Arkansas, taking over, you know, a house and a building to have a studio in. And so I'm, you know, one of these first agents of change, you know, that could be a good thing and could be a bad thing. So I keep thinking about situations where, you know, new communities move in and don't actually cause harm and violence to the communities that already exist. And I got to give it to my Latino community in Las Vegas, and in a lot of places like downtown Las Vegas, you know, these places are run down. You know, the white people move to the outskirts of the cities, and then we're left with what's in the middle. And Latinos, and specifically the Mexican and you know, the Mexican, Chicano, and Central American community in Las Vegas has really taken ownership over a lot of these places downtown, and have revitalized full neighborhoods without any government assistance or any help from the city at all. And right now, because of that, you know, Vegas, that part of Vegas, you start seeing the gentrification begin, you know, which is really sad because a lot of these people spend a lot of time, you know, building community in these churches, even at these restaurants, at these places that they, you know, they made for their own people, and then it just kind of disappears overnight, specifically in places like, you know, in places like Las Vegas. So anyway, these pieces, I wanted to kind of freeze time and kind of celebrate what people like my grandfather and other Latinos have done in these shopping centers, in these little weird spaces, and created, you know, a community and a future, even though probably the psychological trauma does not outweigh that good that they did to me personally in that church. I think I really wanted to have a piece that highlighted and kind of gave thanks for these spaces that still exist in Vegas. So that's just a little bit about my work and the work that's at NMSU right now. Krystal, will you tell us about your work, please? You're muted.
This way only because the screen is here so I can see what's going on, but I will, if you could just keep a timer for me, just okay. So I wanted to start up here because I've been thinking a lot, being in grad school, you know, you have to talk about your work all the time, and I've been in just like people are hearing you talk about your work over and over again. So it's like the same people hearing you talk about your work over and over again. And I keep thinking like, okay, what's the fastest way for me to describe what my work is about? And I think I just really have been thinking about invisibility and visibility. And I feel like that's just like the fastest way for me to communicate, you know, is thinking about the invisibility of labor, the invisibility of brown bodies, the invisibility of just so many things in our communities that we know happen, but we don't know happen, or people that exist, but we don't always just think about or take account for. And this was just such an inspirational piece for me. So I feel like it was a very important moment for me in my artwork. So I wanted to start off with this. This is these were collaborators. Their group was called ASCO, and this was the piece. This was a tag that they did outside of LACMA, and it was because there was no Latino or Latinx representation inside the museum. So they just decided to tag the outside of the museum, and that was just so important for me, I think. And I do want to preface it with saying that, and I was having a conversation earlier with some of the people here. I did not grow up. And my formative years were not a time of social media. There was no social media for me. So I had no access to Black and brown artists at all, other than whatever was taught in school. And we know that was very minimal, I think I didn't join Facebook and there was no Instagram until maybe late in my college years. So when I found about USCO and other Black and brown artists was very, very much later in my art career. And so this was very formative. If you can go to the next slide. So I started making a lot of work that I was, trying to literally just like mimic this like laborious process where I really just thought that the labor I continue to make work that's very laborious, but initially I definitely think I wanted to make work that was very ethereal, very ephemeral, very, I don't know, divine or inspired by this like minimal aesthetic is what I thought was important for me to make, for it to be important. If you could go to the next slide. And I started to make these objects that had no color. I really wanted to take out my identity out of my work as much as possible, because I thought that was the only way that my work could really be understood in the contemporary art world, right? And so this piece, and I also started working with language a lot. That piece that I showed in the beginning with USCO, that was very formative. I started to understand the way that language could be very subversive. The way that, humans first started to use language was to communicate and to just simply name things, just to verbalize simple communications things. And around this time, this was made a little bit later, I realized, language was becoming language and images were becoming so synonymous with our everyday life because of social media. And it was as somebody who had started to do text work, I had been very attracted to text work, whereas because I've always been very attracted to literature and reading. I've been always a very voracious reader. It started to not really do what I wanted it to do because of perhaps just how much people, had, access to images, text and images because of social media. And so I started to abstract the text a little bit, and it's not so abstract as to where you couldn't decipher what was being said and what was being written. And maybe this is simple, but I really liked to force the person or the audience to just sit there and have to dig through and try to decipher the symbols and try to figure out, much like when we go to these just different, I don't know, if we're looking at work anywhere or artwork or paintings, we have to sit there and try to figure out the symbolism, the metaphors. And so if you could go to the next slide. So this is the back end of that same piece. And also I started out my career or my journey as an artist, as a photographer. And so all I was ever looking at was light. And so I think this was a very important thing for me as I started to make sculptures or objects in space, because I really always was super influenced by how light was hitting an object, how the object looked in the space with light. I don't know, lighting has just always been really important. So as you can see here, if you stand behind the piece, it just looks like a large white wall. But if you were on the other side of it, the light would come through it and this message would appear. If you could go to the next slide, please. And so this was really important for me. These two images, they're not necessarily part of work that I've shown. They're these two reference images that have been super important for me in my career in grad school. And the one on the right is probably the image that is responsible for me starting to use color in my work, because I never, it's always been really hard for me to talk about how I just really didn't want to add color into my work, because I just it's just so hard, as sometimes the way, and Justin talked about people wanting to pigeonhole you and make or encourage you to make work about your identity. And for me, it's not only just making work about your identity, but then people always then talk about you making work as a woman artist or as a person of color or as whatever, right? People just always want to place you. And so this moment on the right is my dad. My dad's now retired. He did drywall his entire life. He's been working since he was 14. And he had come home from work, and he was wearing a neon yellow shirt, just his like construction uniform. And he was standing against the door looking at something that my mom was doing. That's my mom. You can't really tell, but that's my mom through the window. And the sun was so bright. The sun is so bright in Las Vegas. It was like shining through the door and reflecting this neon green, yellow onto the door. And it was just such evocative moment for me. It was just such an important moment. And I think I just really knew I had to start working with these colors. They just really, not only did they say so much in regards to my family and my upbringing, but also the vernacular of Las Vegas, where I've grown up, which we've been talking about, like the neon. And so this photo on the left, that is a piece when I started to play around with light. I just actually on this corner here, I just was like playing around with some things, and there was this quote unquote what I thought like this like divine light. And I'm definitely not like religious or anything, but I saw this light coming through exactly where I had placed this neon green piece, and it was just like mimicking this exact same thing. And I don't know, I'm not like a superstitious person, but it was this like important moment for me where I was like, okay, I need to get away from making these monochromatic white pieces. I just really need to just lean into making work that I want to make and stop worrying about making work that white curators want to have in museums. But if you could go to the next slide. So I started to do that. I started to make similar, work that I'd been making. And so this is a piece that was at the Minnesota Center for Book Arts. And what I started to do is also thinking of, communities are super important to me. I really love working with communities and learning about communities. And I thought the best way was to like learn about stories that had happened within certain communities. So if you can go to the next slide. So this at the Minnesota State University, there had been no tenure faculty in the Chicano Studies department, and the students just protested and did a sit-in and all got arrested for wanting there to be some, tenured faculty at the university. And it was a group called Who's Diversity, because the university had been doing all these efforts to bring diversity to the university. But, as we all know, sometimes this is all super surface level and not things that actually bring meaningful change to these institutions. And so this actually says Who's Diversity in this sort of more abstract way with these neon colors. And I just started to really enjoy the way these colors looked so much, so different in these different light scenarios and these lights, and also in these environments, and try to start, having these conversations, not like remind communities of these conversations, but myself learning how communities change and evolve and help each other, and then also be a part of that and not come in and try to like bring in my own conversation to this work. But if we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to skip through these next ones a little bit quickly because I'm running out of time, but this is the Mark Rothko Chapel that I was like super inspired by. And this kind of relates more to the piece at NMSU. I started to think of spiritual spaces, or I started to think also of just the performative nature, the spectacular nature of where I've grown up, and also growing up Catholic. And just like, I didn't have access to art really growing up, and thinking how the church was the access to art that I had until my 20s pretty much. And if you can go to the next slide. This was a piece that I did at the Marjorie Barrick Museum, where I was recreating these pieces that you could sit in front of, and you would really sit in front of the piece, and these neon, these bright, these fluorescent colors really do become enveloped by them, and they just mess with the way that you look at things, and they become so experiential. And that's reminds me so much. I think it's such a direct connection to, you know, how I felt going into these churches, just like my first experience with art. If you could go to the next slide. So this is one of the first pieces. This is actually the first piece I did while in grad school, still thinking along the same lines. The colors don't look so great on the screen, but this is a fluorescent orange that hurts your eyes when you look at it, and it just looks kind of muted here, but it's the same thing, but like walking around this experience, and with the air in the room, it would just sort of slightly move in space, and then starting to bring in material also into it. So this is all plastic that's been thrown away that I like pulled out of the dumpster and like re-ironed into these shapes and like recreated. And each one of these are plastic bags, and they say life is ridiculously awesome. They're like Kmart bags that were like thrown away, and just like thinking of the idea of like just bringing materials back into the art space, that sort of like the way we, you know, sort of canonize or do the same with dinosaur bones. I feel like this was once a dinosaur bone, so why not put the plastic back? But if you can go to the next slide, and actually go to the next one. I'm just gonna jump quickly through this. So this is the piece at the New Mexico State and New Mexico State University. New Mexico State University, sorry. And so this is this is the piece that I created for it, and it's thinking along all those same lines. If any of you have seen it in person, so each one of these blocks was created by hand from a mold of a breeze block. And I think also in my work, I always think of quote unquote like highbrow and lowbrow, and just exactly just like invisibility, visibility is like my dad wearing this construction outfit, which we see every day and we ignore, but these are like supposed to be these like highly visible colors, but also colors that we ignore. And just thinking also of breeze blocks that were this mid-century modern architecture that is now, you know, having a revival. So we see it in like we see it in dilapidated motels, like original breeze blocks, but then we also see it, they're very expensive to purchase, which is one of the reasons I decided to just make them all by hand. But they're, you know, they're super expensive, and it's this you know, mid-century modern architecture that was made for very practical reasons, just like cool down homes to like block light, and they're just like super designed forward and beautiful, and they have this very practical use. But I find it so interesting that you see them in motels and then in like very expensive homes. And the inside of the text says, "¿Qué he hecho yo para merecer esto?" What have I done to deserve this? And it's a line from a Pedro Almodovar movie, in which the same thing. There's just I feel like this is a whole another long conversation, but he just a lot of his movies just have like feminist characters, queer characters, and a lot of, you know, this was in the 80s. He was just making a lot of movies from like the feminist perspective, and just seeing like how women or femmes move through the world in this like hyper masculine patriarchal spaces. If we can go to the next slide. I won't show well, I guess maybe the one on the right, if you could click on that one. And so I don't know if it'll show, but it's just a video of walking through the space. This is really, gosh, I really hate, a part of me hates making work that you can only experience in person, because I feel like it just really defeats the whole purpose, because it's just so inaccessible to so many people. But I'm just so glad that I have the opportunity to have this at New Mexico State University. I was born in El Paso, Texas, and I still have a lot of like family there, and I go back very often. So at the very least, it makes me excited that there's such a huge Latino community who can go. Like my family was actually able to come to NMSU from Chihuahua to visit this, and I feel like that was one of the most like special moments in my life. But okay, I'm not going to go over the last slide because I think we're past time, but I'm done.
Thanks, Krystal.
Thank you.
I can very often not say NMSU either. That's why I just use the acronym. So maybe if our grads could turn on the video, we're actually in the museum. The grads are in the museum under Justin's piece. Yay, NMSU grads. And then Amy, do you have the Stanford grads in your?
They're they're online. Oh my gosh, where?
Oh, hi guys. So
some of them they're online, and we weren't able to connect everybody. So
okay, well, everybody can ask questions in the chat, right? And Amy, you and I will read out chat questions, but Bree and NMSU grads, maybe we'll open it up first to you guys for any questions you might have as practicing artists with studios in different places than your homes, maybe, or questions about the show, or questions about anything that you have for Krystal and Justin. And then the participants that are online can start writing questions in the chat, and we can ask questions from the chat, Amy and I. Go ahead, Joanna.
Okay, so this is for Krystal. I know you said you were inspired by spiritual spaces in some of your work. I was wondering if that goes for your installation here also, because of how I get that feeling, because of how ornate it is, and you can enter it and experience it.
And could I add on to that too?
wait. Can you just repeat the beginning of it, because just the beginning cut off, and so I just want to make sure I.
Yes, I heard you say that some of your work was inspired by spiritual spaces.
Yes.
Yes, I was wondering if that was the same situation for your installation here at the museum.
And then, yes.
To add on, because one thing I found like was it was such a different experience going back and seeing the work on your own. Like at the opening, I like wanted everybody to get out of there. I mean, it's just like it's this really beautiful moment experiencing it on your own. And so I just wanted to add that as a comment.
Yeah. So yes, definitely. I think this goes back to me saying the whole thing about invisible. I started to think about Ex-Votos, and, Dr. Manuel Ortega told me that a lot of Ex-Votos weren't considered contemporary art, or I don't know if they are now, but for a long time they weren't. And thinking about how a lot of Latino and just like indigenous and like, it just like any art that just not like inspired by like European art is like kind of relegated to like craft. And I really wanted to make this piece that is not only spiritual in the sense, but loud. I feel like churches, these colonizer machines, like churches are made by the Spanish, and they're just so loud and in your face and aggressive, aggressively rich and wealthy. And And I really have this desire to make work that now with the color, now that I've added the color, that's like aggressively loud and unapologetic. And I think, you know, it's both spiritual, but it's spiritual in the sense that it gives you this experience where you feel overwhelmed, like sensorially overwhelmed, where it's like your eyes and maybe you start to be more aware of what you're hearing, or I don't know, just like I hope in different ways, but yes, I do. I'm not going to be so gluttonous to say that, oh, I hope it's a spiritual experience for you, like not at all, but I do hope it just gives you some sort of overwhelming experience, which I certainly got at these churches. So yeah, I hope that is, yeah.
I think the work sort of there's like a vibration in the space too.
Yes. Well, that's really wonderful. I mean, that's wonderful to hear. I actually didn't get to experience the work by myself in the space because I installed it and then I immediately had to leave. And then I was there for the opening. And you're right, it's so different to experience it in a packed space when there's people, you know, including myself, like taking selfies and having a good time and then enjoying it in the silence, which is why I'm so inspired by these like space and light artists and these like all these, like, as Justin actually likes to call them, the great whites, you know, all these the landscape artists, the minimalists, the light and space artists, these men who just like took the liberty to take up all this space and just like think so big and greatly of themselves and make all these like big statements. You know, it's like I want to make, not that I'm trying to compare myself, but I also want to take up this space, but like talk about different American experiences, you know, like just, it's not, yeah.
I think overwhelming is a really good word.
Does Pablo wants to ask something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
I guess this is a question for both of you. I guess you both have talked about, I mean, the kind of game you have to play while being brown or being non-white, dealing with white institutions such as museums or the art world in general. And I was wondering how much do you consider that your work has to be legible to a wider audience? I mean, I feel, Justin, you just said you had a specific audience in mind to do so, but I think that also sometimes illegibility can be a way in which you can create hidden transcripts. So you also can choose an audience that's more specific, but it doesn't, it's not a wide audience. And I was wondering how much of this like space of ambivalence of significance in your work do you take on your work? Because
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I've been thinking about that a lot
I can see
lately because I think when I first started making work, I was all about accessibility and making sure that my, you know, I used to say I want to make art that my, you know, 8-year-old cousin can understand and my 86-year-old abuelita can understand, right? That was like a big thing for me. And then after having maybe like 5 museum shows under my belt, I had many experiences where people kind of disregarded my work because I didn't explain kind of the meanings behind it. So I still think I still like my work to be accessible, much like Krystal talked about, you know, like maybe like, you know, physically, but also just like, you know, people's reading of my work. But there's always many layers beneath it. And so people that just kind of blow the work off I see that happen all the time. But then the people that kind of peel behind the surface and kind of get a sense of what I'm doing, kind of see the meaning behind it. And something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is Krystal and I hit on this a lot, this idea of like being a Latinx artist in the United States, and how personally, I think my work, I know my work is beautiful, stunning, whatever, very colorful, but it's also very impressive because of the amount of labor that it takes to make that work. And I find myself on top of ladders, making buildings into piñatas, or covering, these white walls and these white institutions with groups of people watching me do that, thinking like, okay, so what is the art? Is it the labor that I'm doing? Or is it the mural that I'm doing? Does this have so much value because it took me a month to make with a team of 20 people? Or is it, or can it stand on its own? And so, it's a great question that you're asking, because I'm actually struggling with that answer for myself right now. But I can't say that I did not specifically make my work kind of tongue in cheek and an easy read in the beginning. I did that on purpose to kind of highlight the ridiculousness of what I was being asked to do as a Latinx artist, but nobody read it that way. Everybody read it as like, oh, look, this guy's making piñatas, how fun, let's hire him to do our Dia de los Muertos thing, or let's hire him to do this, and so that's how my career actually started. And now that I actually like have my feet like sunken in, I can say like, I'm not doing that, and this is why. And if I do an installation at your museum, please don't let people watch me do it. I'm not an animal at the zoo, which is something that I did not feel empowered to do before. And so, yeah, but I figured out the museum world a long time ago. Big always has a big sculpture is always a big impact. And so I love making big sculpture. And so I'm trying to get away from, I'm trying to get more abstract. I'm trying to get more experimental, but I got to pay my rent as an artist too, so I'm trying to find that balance right now. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question, but I tried. Krystal.
No, that was so good.
Do you want to respond, Krystal? Okay.
About legibility.
The legibility?
Yeah.
The what? Well, I mean, that's why I was making all the white work, right? I mean, literally, I only showed you guys 2 pieces. Literally, all the work I was doing was so like internalized racism or like internalized misogyny, because I'm making work. I mean, literally, I was told when I did this piece, and it was all handwriting. And at the time I was just like, really, I love the mark, right? Like mark, we all like in the art world, we think about mark making and like the artist's hand. And then I was told that it just looks so, I can't even think of the word right now, but that I was like so feminine, that I was like, so it wasn't abstract. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, I've just been, and I'm not, God, this all sounds so cliche now, but I've been told every microaggression in the book. Like I've been told so many different things. Like literally my first museum show, somebody came up to me and was just like, well, that's a good try. Like literally, like I've been told like so many, or when I even got into Stanford, they're like, well, right now is the perfect time as a brown woman to apply to Stanford. So good job. Like literally, like I've been told every single thing, and you learn to kind of, and so I was making all the, and I'm not saying I would never make work that was all that there was like absent of color. Like I would do that again for different reasons, but I think the internalized misogyny and internalized racism was just like, I need to make work that has no color because people are going to think it's like colloquial and like like about my culture and like this and that. And I was like, let me make work that uses fun, like, but whatever. But so yes, I feel like that's what I was doing. And now I'm just like, maybe it could still be seen that way. But for me, it's still saying all the things I wanted to say while having all these like stories. And like Fabi said, maybe you see work and it says one thing, but there's all these layers to peel now. I feel like for me. but that's just been my journey. I think everybody has a different journey, and it's also like every year, because of the internet, is so different, like the world I started to make art in is not the same world now. I feel like you can just like evolve so quickly and do whatever the hell you want, and it's like not the same.
Krystal, there's
So
also,
Oh,
go ahead, Justin.
yeah. It's a great question. I really want to hear your answer to from Joanna or Joanna. It says, what is the difference between working with white curators and, for example, someone like Dr. Ortega? How different has it been for you?
Wait, what? Say it again.
Did you hear that?
That was actually,
Like-
so that was my job, Justin, but what?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm coming, Marissa. I'm coming for your job too.
Please, Justin, please.
Wait, what was it? What was the question?
Jonna asked a question on the Q&A and Justin was reading it. Thank you, Justin. But said, Krystal, can you explain or expand upon the differences between working with, as you mentioned, white curators and Dr. Ortega, like, and how different has it been for you?
Should I answer it first?
Yeah, answer it, Krystal, and then I think
well,
both of you should answer it.
Yes, I'll go quickly. I think the first museum show, I haven't had that many shows. Justin is like, has had like, he's like, wait, hold on. What is it called? He is a mid-career artist now. I'm still officially, after like 15 years, he's a mid-career artist. But so the very first out of like 2 museum shows I've had, which this being the second one, it was Dr. Manuel Ortega. This is when we were friends, and before he was like really officially, like I feel like a friend and a mentor, he came to my house, and I was having a studio visit with the curator from the Nevada Art Museum, and he came and he's like, okay, you're gonna lay this out here, you're gonna lay this out here, and you're gonna say this, and you're gonna say this, because this is what people like to hear. And he told me exactly what to say, he told me exactly what to show, and I got in the show, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've made like, and when he told me what to do and what to show, I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna get this show, like I'm nobody, like and that sounds like really down, but it's like wasn't trying to be down on myself, I just had never experienced that. And he's like, oh, all it took was from these like white curators to tell you that you had what it takes, and you believed them, but you didn't believe me, a brown curator, like, and I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And like, the reason that I'm also in this show now is because of Dr. Manuel Ortega. So I feel like, honestly, a lot of the shows that I've been invited to be a part of have been because of other like Black and brown curators. So for me, it has been life-changing that people in power now starting to be Black and brown, because then they start to see other voices and other experiences. But I mean, I'm not saying that that's always and only the case, but it really has been a big difference for me.
Honestly, I haven't worked with that many curators of color in my career. And the couple of times that I have, it has been a great experience. It had, but I will say you have to explain. You don't have to explain yourself as much when you're working with a curator that maybe shares the same culture as you do. But a lot of these first experiences that I've had in museums, a shout out to Crystal Bridges here nearby in Bentonville, Arkansas, and places like the Denver Art Museum, where I experienced a lot of micro and macro aggressions from the curator there. It inspired a lot of it actually inspired performance art from those experiences, and it kind of helped me navigate other situations after that. So, but yeah, I think that the big difference is you sometimes you just use less energy because you don't have to explain everything twice. That's just been my experience. Any other questions? Krystal, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I thought you said
do you-
Marissa. Did you say Krystal?
Krystal,
Wait, what was it?
do you feel like you're making art about your identity more now that you're in grad school than you did when you were in as an undergrad?
Yeah. Yes, because now I'm like aware of it. And even, I don't know, like maybe we're all making work about our identity, right? Gosh, are you? I don't know.
I mean, I guess you always,
that's a tough question.
I guess you always have been, but like, but there is a definite shift, right? In the way that you're telling your story.
Well, I am still making work about my identity, but I think now I'm just like not like so caught up in just like the nuances of it. And I'm thinking of just like larger global conversations. Like my voice is important enough to also think of these larger global conversations, thinking of like extractive material industries, thinking about mining, thinking about labor and unions within the United States. And just like, I think it's like really great to think of your identity, sure, because I am who I am and been raised by the people that I have, but I'm also like, I don't know, it's just like there's the impact that we're all having on the communities that we're around and all the privileges that even I have within my community. And so not being like just obsessed with like my experience and my voice and just thinking how like the impact that I even have within my community too. So should I ask
grads, do you have other questions? Can I ask if the NMSU grads have other questions?
I would like to give a special shout out to Gus for all the help that they gave me during while I was installing my piece. I definitely couldn't have done it without their help. So
Thanks, Gus. I mean, I'm really actually interested in hearing from the NMSU grads, thinking about the ways in which a lot of you all are coming from different places and different backgrounds and in different, what is it like, in an experience like this, where now you've each in some way, not all of you, but most of you have worked with Justin, have worked with Krystal. Are there questions that you have now about their process or seeing them through this process, from seeing their works being installed, potentially helping them with their install in relationship to your own practices and in relationship to the places where you come from? So I'm actually kind of asking the grads a question.
I think like for myself, looking at Krystal's work, thinking about light and labor, actually some of her answers today kind of answered some questions that I had about my own work and my own thesis exhibition coming up, which is really helpful to see other artists thinking the same way that I am, in the sense of the idea of where we come from, the history that follows us as brown people.
And for you, it's like, well, one of the things we were talking about a little bit when we were muted was just like seeing some of the evolution of your work, just like in your little, when what you shared today. So thinking about like process, material, scale, how you sort of like naturally shifted some of your ideas. And that was just something that sort of kept coming up, was like, so I don't know, I'm not to speak for everybody, but like this, it's interesting because Gus came in as like 3D and now Gus is shifting more towards like photo and using light and gels and things like that in interesting ways. But like, I don't know, maybe like thinking, how do you approach different materials? How do you approach scale? Or do you see, or maybe what do you see the relationship between like research in your practice? I don't know if you can hear me as well, but like, you know, like, so I don't know, those are some of the things we were sort of like talking about a little bit here. I know it's a lot.
No. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't put enough emphasis on the research part of my work right now in this state of my career. I wish I had a little bit more time to develop the ideas that I have right now, because I've been doing this thing called working intuitively the last 5 years or so, which is my way of saying like, I'm just gonna get to your museum or gallery and, you know, respond immediately to this. And then I kind of think of the work as I think about the work as I go along, which is not a very healthy way, I think, to create work, especially if you want to be happy with the results of it. So it's something that I'm taking more seriously now, is having that lead time before an installation to really experiment, to really, you know, think about the materials and why I'm using them, not just because I have to get this done for a deadline, which is like something that started in art school for me, right? Like we have to get it done for the crit. And so I right now, whenever I make mistakes or experiment with different materials, it's like in a public setting. And I have done that in the last 10 years. I've had a lot of shows that have been flops, but I just don't show them to anybody when I present my work, right? And so, yeah, I think, yeah, I think, you know, putting more of an emphasis on the process, on how you get there. I wish I would have been pushed to see that more when I was a younger artist, because I think now I'm not in the practice of doing that, and I think it has affected my work personally for me, like the way I see it in a, you know, less than positive way. I'm not going to say negative, because, you know, because I love learning from previous work that I've made. So yeah, Krystal, what do you think?
Well, I'm like all the NMSU grads, I'm also in grad school. So I feel like I'm in a place right now where I feel very lucky that I get to spend a lot of time talking about my work, researching my work. I've had friends who went through grad school before I did, and the advice that they gave to me was always like, listen, like have as many studio visits as you can, or talk to as many people as you can, or you know, take as many references of books that people recommend to you as you can, because once you graduate, nobody cares to talk to you about your work as much as they do in grad school, because people are getting paid to talk to you about your work in grad school. And once you graduate, nobody cares about like giving you all this, you know, either fellowships or grants or funding or attention or whatever it is. And so I feel kind of, I don't know, I took a very different career path than Justin. I worked for I graduated in 2009 from my undergrad, and I didn't get into I didn't go back to grad school until 2 years ago. So I worked professionally as like a freelance photographer for a long time. And I bartended for a couple years before that. So I think it's been really nice for me to being in a program that really, I think it also just depends on the program, and lots of programs do like and have an emphasis on research, or, you know, like I've realized that I really enjoy teaching too, or like TAing and like working with students. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like research, I've realized, I guess I've always known how much research has an importance on my work, but it's what's made me realize, and this kind of goes back to Fabi's question earlier, if like my work is about identity, being able to research and read and just like learn has made me realize how many more things my work is about than just my identity. It's like I'm part of a global conversation about this and this and this, what, you know, all the different things, you know, whether it's conversations about labor around the world or about, you know, immigrants around the world. And like I said earlier, like mining, extractive industries, material, you know,
Yeah.
philosophy, whatever, you know. So yeah, I really enjoyed researching.
Also, really quick, I just want to mention forming relationships with people that are outside of your, if you're in grad school, like outside of your program, like, and I mean, even when I was an undergrad, I remember I wouldn't really think about like hanging out with the art history students, right? It was like studio and art history was very separate, but that should not be just like in museums, how education and like exhibition departments are separate. It doesn't make any sense. They should be the same department, right? The interpretation is almost as important as the work sometimes, especially in academic spaces. But anyway, making sure to foster the relationships with other people. I found those relationships have been so beneficial for me, and not even art people, you know, just like people that, you know, I like that what they're doing creatively, and I've kind of started working with them. I have really great relationships with art historians like Dr. Ortega, Dr. Erica Abad, Dr. Irene Mata Wellesley, Dr. Alexis Salas here in Arkansas, right? So all these people are helping me interpret my own work and giving me ideas, and we're exchanging ideas. And that's what it's all about. Because once you leave school, then who are you going to talk to about your art? You know, it's nice to kind of have that network of thinkers to kind of help you go along. And then also, I have been really blessed to work with curators a couple of times, going back to that question of research, where the curator and I collaborate on the research for an exhibition together. And for example, those nachos that I showed you were part of a larger exhibition of all Tex-Mex food. And so me and the curator and I, Catherine Hall, she helped me, you know, get all the information that I needed to make that exhibition. So it's there's different ways to kind of research your work, especially when it's a collaboration between an institution and yourself. Okay.
And I think a lot of it too is like, you know, we talk about, it's just like staying curious, like cultivating curiosity, like, you know, researching your peers. It doesn't always have to be like just, you know, your specific theme or your ideas or whatever it might be, but it's like, you know, staying in touch with what's happening locally, regionally, nationally, participating in communities, like all of these different things, I think. And it's like, you know, cultivating a practice, whether that's through making work or through showing up to people's shows, or, you know, finding community in different ways. And it's great to learn more about your work. Thank you for sharing it with us here physically at MSU and telling us more about it tonight. It's really like beautiful, you know, rich, like just really stunning, amazing work. So thank you for taking the time and for meeting with us here in the gallery.
Thank you so much, Marissa and Amy, for like inviting us for this. And I'm going to be back to take down my piece the first week of January. So I hope I can reconnect, because I met some of the grad students then, and I really, like, it was really nice. And I hope that I can reconnect with some or all of you when I'm back, because it was just like really lovely. I do just want to add one thing real quick, is I can be a little bit of like an introvert, and Justin is like such an extrovert. And I think one thing I learned from him is, I'm not saying you're an extrovert 100% of the time, but I just really saw how really caring about the community and caring about individuals, and just like you said, being curious and just like caring for people, and, wanting to have community and conversations with people, that just like goes so far because there's just like, I don't know, like we all started to make work because we like loved it on such a personal level. It brought so much joy, but also because of the people that we got to make work around. And it's so cheesy to say, but it's really important to keep remembering that because we all chose a really hard life.
Yeah. It's Krystal. Oh, am I muted? No. It's so just really quick to put a little bow on it for me. The reason I'm here in Arkansas is because of that community, is because of those connections. I told you about the microaggression riddled exhibition in Denver. Well, the saving grace was the assistant curator, my friend Caitlin Maestas Garcia, who she basically was the one that held it together and was there to kind of help us throughout the whole exhibition. And then she moved to Arkansas and became the curator at the museum here at the Momentary. Then she hired me to be the years later down the line, we stayed in touch, and she brought me in as the artist in resident. So I was the artist in resident this last year because I was here with the community and I got to meet a lot of people. I got the opportunity to get funding to start an artist residency. So that all came from a friendship, a real ass friendship, because we were in it together to get that exhibition finished. And I know that more opportunities will come from mutually between me and Caitlin, which is really wonderful.
I'm sorry, there were a couple of Q&A questions I didn't get to because you guys were talking. Do you mind if I ask you 2 more questions that are in here?
Sure.
When you create work about home, especially when it's displayed in states far away, what is one thing you hope people learn about you and where you come from?
Ooh,
Do you want to go first?
that's a great question. Oh my gosh.
I can
no,
go
you
first.
go.
So I've been thinking a lot about, I don't know. I don't think that my work automatically ever screams Las Vegas, but what I want people to think, I think what I want people to think about Las Vegas is that what like a weird and magical place it is. And I hope that they want to come visit it. It's just like such a great metaphor for just everything. I don't know. Las Vegas is so much about like symbolism and the metaphor and all these like the absurd and the sensational and like all, it's just like such a weird place to grow up. And I think people I hope people can want to go visit it beyond like the nightclubs or the gambling or, all that. And just like go visit it with like new eyes.
Yeah. I think for me, like Vegas is just like in my bones, so like anything that I make is a reflection of where I grew up. And so I think I do like this idea of home, and I think about it a lot in my work. So, but I think in a different sense of like when I'm doing these immersive installations, I want you to feel like you are in a place that you're welcome, so I do take a lot of inspiration actually from Catholic churches and chapels, because you get overwhelmed by the Baroque, by so much on the walls that, it's kind of like when you go to a TGI Fridays or an Applebee's, right? It's like they put all that stuff on the wall to make you feel like you're at somebody's house, right? And so even with these cardboard signs that I make that are behind y'all at NMSU, I wanted it to be very playful, because I'm thinking about my childhood when I was making them. So the colors that I used and, the shapes of the signs, and then also kind of hung them salon style and a little bit too high because, my mom and my grandma hang everything so high in the house, right? So I was thinking about my grandmother's kitchen when I actually hung the work behind you. So that's kind of how home infiltrates into my work. It's not specifically Vegas, but it's there.
And then, well, there was just a note to you all that from one of the art history grads that they appreciate listening to you both and that this talk will help enhance their discussions when they teach orientation in art. So generalize, you guys rock in a very art historical way. And then, Justin, is there a time, if there is time, which we're going to make it, can you talk a little bit more about your involvement with or in performance art, and as an artist, what draws you to performance art?
Okay. Let me try to make this quick. So, for me, I'm drawn to performance art the most because I don't like it and I don't understand it, and I think it's boring, and most of the time it's torturous. I'm so sorry to all your performance art friends, but if you are a performance artist and what you do is move one thing from one place to another place really slow, like what are you doing? So I call myself a performance artist, and I do performance art because honestly, because I don't understand it, and I don't think I'm educated enough to really appreciate it, and I'm just a hater, like you just heard, right? So my performance art is a little bit, I guess, like more subtle, but I do these performances. The main ones that I do are called family fiestas, and they were inspired by my time at Crystal Bridges, because when I was there installing one of my lowriders, it was the curator's birthday, and they threw a birthday party in the break room of the museum, and it was a Mexican themed birthday party, like with a piñata, with mariachi music, with a margarita machine, with nachos. And I was confused because I thought it was for me, but I was the only Mexican person there. And then it was his birthday. I was like, well, whatever, I'm making nachos. And so that day I was asked by the education staff if I wanted to come back and do programming later in the year in October for Dia de los Muertos. I had never celebrated Dia de los Muertos before, but I said, of course, I'll take your money. So I ended up pitching this idea. I said, well, if I come back, can I do a performance? And I want to party, like I want to throw a party with my family to show y'all what a Latinx party looks like. You know, it was kind of this, it was just this immediate response, because I was really confused and then angry by seeing my culture being used as decoration, basically. So anyway, that was the beginning of these family fiesta performances. And then it was also the beginning of me really thinking of myself when I'm presenting in front of these institutions. I think of it as a performance as well. So I always wear, whenever I'm Justin Favela, the artist, I always wear a uniform that lets you know that I'm performing. I wear the skeleton shirt and something red. So you're witnessing one of my performances now. You're welcome. Oh my gosh.
I think we got to clap and end on that. What do you think, Amy?
No, thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Amy, thank you so much for putting this together with us. Krystal, your time is precious and amazing, and we are so excited to see more of what you do outside of Stanford. Thank you to all the NMSU grads.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, Justin, thank you. I don't know who else I would want to stand in an empty aisle in Walmart with. I just don't. It's only you.
Oh my! So yeah, literally the day the world shut down, we went to Walmart to try to get toilet paper together, and we couldn't find any. Wow.
0. I've got the best picture of you in front of a whole aisle of empty toilet paper.
That was wild. And then I got on a plane after that.
Thank God we got you on the plane. You were almost stuck in Las Cruces for a
I
year.
know. Well, that's not too bad. Y'all got
Thank you
Whataburger.
so much,
All right.
Justin and Krystal and Marissa and students on all ends. And this was lovely and so fun to have all these people in different places zooming in. And Ileana, who's been the master behind everything that's happening right now.
Thank you, Ileana.
Behind the Clorox. She is. So this has been awesome. I love this conversation. I love having being Krystal in your studio with your work that you have made or thinking about. You have your stones here, and having students sit in the space under Justin's work. It's so meta. I love it. So thank you, everybody. This was awesome, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, Marissa.
Bye, everyone.
And
Thank you. Thank you.